because she has plans for that little corner to change it up with her lawn.
I don't know. how fast it's-
I don't know either. I was hoping to
Then
stay
what?
that corner, she can make that story nook corner or whatever over there.
We didn't get the grant.
Whoa, no. Bummer. How much was the grant?
That wasn't that much. Like 2,000.
Well, folk court can do that. We can do that easily. We're rich. They're just asking me for her to ask for stuff.
For what board?
The folk court, Friends of
Oh,
Water.
Like what board? What are you?
Mayor Monday's done a good job with that board. He's got a lot of money. Yeah, he's been spending lately.
I
I've been on
think
board.
she has another thing that she's kind of got.
Oh.
Who? Mayor Monday, yeah.
Okay, we are live, so.
That's not bad at all.
Make the link just a little bit more.
Parking lot? Oh, yeah, Christmas. You getting ready for Christmas already?
Oh, yeah.
Do you have a date so I can tell the jazz band
Or
for the tree lighting?
it's the Saturday after Thanksgiving.
Okay, I'll let them know. I'll reach out and see if I can get that ball rolling. So 7 o'clock or whenever dusk is, that's when,
I think we did it at 6:30.
so we want them maybe start at 6, stop at 6:30. Let us do a thing and then they can continue on till 7. That sound about right? Yeah.
I'm waiting on a couple of quotes to come. And our first meeting will be in July. So, the week after 4th of July, we'll have our first Christmas meeting. That way I'll have some more
We'll put that.
idea of what we got.
Okay.
So Waste Connection is gonna be a part of it also. I got 3 others.
That's good.
Let me check and see, but yeah, I want them for that entertainment.
I figured leading up to it, we do our presentation and they can finish it off or whatever.
Yeah, well, I have a.
Very similar word.
Here's that fellow.
That guy,
The local one? Yeah, they got 7 for whatever.
yeah, he's one that.
Drake.
Great, yeah.
There's possibility that we'll probably have him. I couldn't get him last year.
Oh.
Give me his dad, he's the one that owns Fox Hill.
Yeah. That's what I heard.
But yeah. The last 6 weeks or so, I've been pretty active and trying to get back to the plan. So we'll have our first one in July on that way. Kind of depends on what Greg does. No. Sarah Johnson had the guy, the girl she, Holly,
Oh, yeah.
she has an interest also. But some of them, depending on some of the finances and donations we get in, what we're actually doing. Happy.
Sure.
But I do like that.
Very Christmassy music. Maybe we can combine Jake and the jazz band.
It was very possible.
Which I think is a song.
Again, has never been closed.
It'll be on the 25th.
November, okay. That's like tomorrow, right?
Oh,
Yeah.
That's how I feel like.
Okay.
Oh.
understand. That's okay though, it makes you feel better.
Drive my wife crazy, but.
You know, if it was just those little things, then we could all be so blessed.
Remember that property that we was talking about, real estate company? Not Buffalo Wild. What is it? Oakland. You're kidding. Even better. I don't know about that.
I don't know about that either, right?
It's right up by Yeah, right across the street from the mall.
Well, there's a Popeyes going right here.
Right.
I'm so sad about
So there's a Popeyes and a Chipotle going on our side.
So the corner at.
So we need-
It's only Mexican food that close.
California, Mexican food.
Yeah.
it. I like it.
You can take the order, but you get.
Yeah, order.
Whataburger?
I.
Oh, that one was worse. That's an hour long, period. Where the one by Albertsons in Arlington's 30 minutes, period.
Wow.
Yeah,
Well, supposedly they'll have a drive, but it's only for your app.
Hmm.
You have to order through your app to use the drive.
that's how Whataburger, they have that too, as an option now. But not sold like.
Yeah, this one's solely.
That's good. That's good. That's good. How you feel about it? I mean, I think it's better.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But I mean, that's a good.
Yeah.
Did you hear about that McDonald's that has no employees?
Yeah.
Fort Worth? It's open up.
Yeah.
What?
It's a fully autonomous McDonald's run by AI.
Where's it at?
Fort Worth, somewhere, at the south side, I think.
Just let you know.
Interesting.
So,
Franchises like to move fast.
They could.
Yeah, they only spent 2 years leading up to this point.
Yeah. It will.
Better than 7-Eleven.
Nobody has 7-Eleven anymore. They tighten the belts. I know they do, but they tighten the belts. There's not 7-Eleven in a 5-mile radius.
And then car wash came in.
Yeah, they found it.
4 lots.
I want
Right, yeah.
Slurpees.
We put the parks, board stuff on there, for the,
The park map and,
no, appointment.
no, she told me to put it on there under the executive session.
The actual, to be able to, the ordinance that allows us to.
Oh,
Zoning,
like
the zoning ordinance.
Not the zoning ordinance for the park.
I'm sorry, it's for us to, make amendments to the, ordinance, selection of chairs.
Vice chair.
Okay, so that's on individual consideration?
Yeah, it'll be an ordinance.
Is it an,
Change the current ordinance.
is it an amendment to the ordinance? Or is it,
We'll need to get with, our lecture.
okay, amendment to ordinance. I think I have to say that. Do you think it should be under executive right now?
He's saying, or he's saying work session and then move it into.
Just need to confirm that with Barbara to make sure we have it on the work session. We have our discussion about it, then we can come in and make it. So.
Okay. I'm gonna put over here, talk to Carvin. I think I still need. Christian, I still need to get the staff report for that utility adjustment. Okay, sounds good. We haven't gotten anything over to the lawyers yet, so. Okay,
You always do.
might need to be here too. All, you're gonna select all?
Yeah, go with all, and that way it's the broader the better. And That's what I mean.
Gotcha.
That, I mean, it's 107. That's not too bad. It's 107.
All right, I'll call to order the Kennedale City Council special meeting, June 15th, 2023 at 1 p.m. We are at City Hall Council Chambers at 405 Municipal Drive. Members of the public may join in person or access a live feed at www.cityofkennedale.com/videos. The virtual option does not allow for public comment. There is no one here to address us or to submit public forms, so I'm not going to read what you would need to do in case you did. Can I get a roll call?
Rocky Gilly,
Present.
Brad Horton,
Here.
Kenneth Michaels,
Here.
Jeff Navarez,
Here.
Mayor Joplin. We have a quorum minus Austin Degenhart.
Thank you. All right, we'll jump into the reason that we're here today, which is a work session to continue the discussions on the bond for infrastructure improvements. But before we get started, I have not like a huge announcement to make, but this is really a huge thing and that I want you guys to look at. You should see that was passed out to you. It says City of Kennedale Capital Projects Plan on the left-hand corner, bond and tax note language for use of funds, this document. If you would pull that out. So I've been wanting this document at least since 2016 timeframe. I asked the city manager then for a list of detail of what the bonds and any money that had been borrowed to give a detail of what the money was used for. And lo and behold, I was told that they did not have that. That did not exist. So this is the first time that this has ever been, to my knowledge anyway, that we've had this, that it exists. It's really, we always should have had it, but now we do. So I wanted to make sure it was going to be in our packet for the 20th, but I felt like since we are in discussions on the bond, that this is an important document for all of us to have to see what we've borrowed, how much we borrowed, and what it was used for, and if there's any balances, what the balances are. So this is the first time that you've seen it, that I've seen this document. I haven't had time to look at it, but I did ask Daryl that if we could have it for today. I felt like it was really important for you to have it for today. So I want to thank Daryl for making this document, Debbie Reed for her efforts in putting this document together. I know she had to go back and spend quite a bit of time digging, trying to figure out where things were, where it went. And so this is, I'm not going to say this is best efforts in putting that together. It's probably not 100% perfect, but it's best efforts in what we were able to find with the monies that has been borrowed up to this point. So thank you so much for that. And please pass along to her as well and Jonathan and his crew. This is for me as a council person. I mean, this is, I'm not going to say it's huge, but it is really big. It's necessary for us to know what is out there and where the money was spent. So thank you for that. So with that being said, we all have that piece. And I will turn this over to you at this point and kick off kind of where we're at from where we ended with the last meeting, the last special meeting on the bonds and borrowing and where we are today. And I'll let you go from there.
All right. Thank you, Mayor. Okay, in front of you, and we weren't able to send this electronically at the time, but I did send it from our past Tuesday meeting. That very next day, I sent you these documents electronically. So what you have in front of you also is that same document. It has not changed. So I didn't know if you still had it electronically or not, but you do have a paper copy in front of you. And looking at that, it'll be the one that has the dark green and the lighter colored green. It's the documents that I'm going to start from. And roughly the difference of what it was from our regular council meeting and to today, a lot of discussion was in reference to 12 million that jumped up to 13 million just in a short amount of time. So we went back and done some calculations, plus the discussions that we have had from that past council meeting. The price went from roughly a $13 million bond to a $17.4 million bond. 15 million of that, well, it started with the 12 million dealing with the water sewer rates for that bond for the infrastructure. So that 13 is now 15 million. So the 15 million, and we have Christian that's here also to help work us through that additional 2 million that we're looking at and the reasoning why. The second part of that is 2.4 million. The 2.4 million is based off of the inflation on several different factors, not just on the water and sewer. The 2.4 actually will come out of like for streets funds, which will help on some of the infrastructure we currently have going on with Colette Sublet, where right now it's roughly 2.4. We're already anticipating that's going to increase. We've had some adjustments that's had to take place in engineering. So the 2.4, going by what Councilman Dagenhart was indicating, if we're looking at a 1% increase before we're able to actually start construction, we're going to have an additional cost that's going to need to be funded. Also with that, just like the mayor was indicating, the paperwork that you received today on the bond and the tax note language that's showing all of our funding that's on it and the purpose of each of those tax notes or the CO bonds, that's roughly where some of this is coming through. So a lot of the paperwork you look at there will show what we've already accomplished in this last year and where some of those funding has come from. So you still have some projects that have not been completed. We do feel that we have the current funding for that. However, as we're moving forward the next couple of years and we're not able to get to that, I'd rather have the money there that we can actually use. If we don't use that, as you look into the bond language, we'll be able to utilize that money for other factors as well. So for instance, we come in 2 years from now and say we did not have to use that money. We have other infrastructure that we can utilize that bond money for. For instance, we have like Kevin Miller as a road that needs improvement. We have other sewer and water, stormwater issues that we can utilize that money for that 2.4. I'm not talking about the 15 million. The 2.4 is what we can utilize those other funds if that max is not needed. So that's what you'll see on that additional 2.4. That's the reason why it's 17.4 million besides the original 15. I'm going to go back to just the 15, the additional 2 million. And that's ultimately the reason why we're here today. So we make sure we fulfill some of our obligations of serving our citizens with the right infrastructure with our water and sewer. As you know, the Basin B sewer line was roughly 12 million. As of our last council meeting, it went up to 13 million. So obviously we have not only a ticking time bomb with the sewer line, but we also have one dealing with our funding to get that accomplished. So that's the reason why for that additional 1 million for that. The extra 2 million is also, since we're going through a study rate, a rate of our water and sewer, which we will start that process as well. These monies will be coming in and out of that fund. So once we get the water rate study completed, that bond will actually move to that fund. So the 15 million will go to the water sewer, and we'll pay through that increase in our water and sewer rates to our citizens. That's how this is being funded. So we already understand we had to have that increase to cover not only what we're doing today, but even for future infrastructure, which is including the sewer line and the 2 water tanks. And at one point, we'll ask for an elevated tank to help in that concept. But the additional 2 million is for us to get the 2 tanks that is needed, which is a 500,000 gallon tank, which is the T4, roughly the one that's behind the high school. The other one is a 750,000 gallon tank, which is currently by the fire station. Those 2 tanks are needed for us, one, to be able to move forward, and we have the supply that if we do have some type of emergency, we have a 500,000 gallon reserve and a 750,000 gallon reserve. The other side of this is the Senate Bill 3 that we're going through, where we have to also meet that obligations that the state has put onto us. That also, we're in that same process, which these 2 tanks will help fulfill that same need that's been put that requirement onto us. The second part of it is generators. So with these 2 tanks, we will need, by the Senate Bill 3 requirements, we will need generators placed at both of these locations as well. Roughly right now, I think the numbers are coming in anywhere from $700,000 to $900,000 per generator. As you're going through the paperwork you received today, and I know you haven't had a chance to look at it, but that bond and tax note language, you will be able to see in there how we have mapped out how we can utilize those funds that we currently have, the ARPA funds that we currently have, and the additional funding that we're asking for on this bond today. So with that, we should be able to get our 2 tanks that we need, 2 generators that we need, the sewer line completed, the survey for our water rate analysis to see where we need to go, which this $15 million bond will go to that expense. So whatever our water rate, sewer rate becomes, that's where that funding will pay for this bond. The 2.4 that I'm talking about, which will be the street repair and other infrastructure cost, that will actually be coming out of our street fund. So it's not coming out of the water or sewer rate. It's totally different. It'll be 2 different sections. So you'll also see that with the paperwork that's presented, and that's where the one that has a green copy, that's where those are outlined as well. So you'll see one of them is indicating utility. That's dealing with the water and sewer. The other one is for the other infrastructure, which that's indicating the 2.4.
If I could ask a clarifying question, the 2.4 million from the street fund, that is to be used for street infrastructure, correct?
Yeah, we'll have the verbiage on the bond.
Okay.
Where we can utilize those monies for any infrastructure. So it can be for stormwater, it can be for water, sewer, streets, anything in a sense that's going to be infrastructure itself.
Okay.
So that could include streets,
Right.
drainage, anything of that nature.
And so what you're proposing is that this 2.4 million be added to the CO.
Correct.
I would like to express the opinion of my own. Since we're looking at a bond issue in November, that we consider putting this 2.4 million as one of the items on that bond issue.
And basically, and there's not an issue to go that direction. We are looking for something that will be roughly another year before we even get to that section. The 2.4, the idea is, one, we're saving that bond for infrastructure for wherever the purchasing is, that we utilize it now. And we're saving that issuance today's money and not a year or year and a half from now. That was the other side of that. One of the infrastructures that we're truly looking at for the 2.4, what I was going to utilize for the Colette Sublet road, that's generally where we're looking at this 2.4. The 2 million that we have in ARPA funds, those ARPA funds will help financing that Colette Sublet road improvement, which includes sewer, water, wastewater. So that funding was actually coming from there. As you're looking through that document, I'm going to utilize the ARPA funds in a sense so we can go purchase a water tank or have the water tank started in the sense to utilize the funding we have to hopefully offset some of the additional costs that may come within the next year. But like, for instance, what was being described last Tuesday at our council meeting from Andrew from Safeco is that the 25 million that we have the opportunity in a year or year and a half, if we choose to do so, besides it being at 25, it's actually will go down to 23 million. So it's just a transfer of when.
Right. So, so help me be clear on this. So I think what I understood was that some money that was initially reserved for the Collet Sublet project can now be used for other things because of the ARPA funds that were not available at the original funding of the Collet Sublet. Am I correct?
Yes and no. So ARPA funds can be used 100% for water, sewer,
And streets, infrastructure, I believe.
Well, and there's two different fundings with
Okay.
it. So the very first million that we have, there was certain restrictions on it, and it was more gathered towards streets. The second funding we received is almost 100% water, sewer, or you can use them both for it, but there's restrictions with it. But one thing about both fundings, water and sewer is 100%. There's no questionings at all. And with the Safeco's, Andrew, the one that works for Safeco, that's what he was recommending is to utilize those fundings from ARPA and utilize that just 100% for our water.
And as I look at this, what it looks like to me, based upon the funding from INS, is there's a one-time funding on INS for this is for the
Rocky, is your microphone on?
yes. Let me get a little closer.
There you go.
Is that the issue where we had to find some way to service the debt on the water and sewer fund until a rate study and the rate increases were implemented to finance that debt?
That's correct.
And so we're going to use those ARPA funds, some amount of that, to float that first year debt?
No,
No.
the first year will actually be paid out of our general fund.
Okay.
Okay, so that, I think it was, at one point it was like 1.1 million,
Yes.
and now it's up to 1.6.
Okay.
So that funding will actually come out of the general fund based off of our INS and M&O.
Right.
So it's actually coming out of the M&O. So you'll see that adjustments as you work your way down.
Yeah, that's the adjustment that starts in 2024.
Yeah,
Okay.
yes, sir. And that's when the numbers are starting to fluctuate, that's what it's doing.
Could we get a flow chart of this? I mean, I'm trying to keep track of it.
Well, and that's the reason why for the
Right.
workshop today
Right.
is because some of it can be,
Mhm.
I mean, the tax rates, although it's the same, it doesn't change. But whenever you're having the bonds come in and how we're structuring the first initial payment to come out of the general fund, it not actually is affecting the M&O side more than it is the INS side. So the idea is we make that payment first, and as we from this point and say 6 months, we'll have the water sewer rate analysis done, which will give us a 5-year projection of where that water rate should be. And the idea is that once we have that figure, we can come in and we'll be able to transfer that funding, this 17 million, we transfer that to the, or it'd be 15 million. We transfer that to the water utility fund. That new rate will pay for that new debt, which is the bond of what we're talking about today. So in a sense, that's the first step. Then when we started talking about the additional 25 million that Andrew was talking about, Safeco, that was when that fund changes from general fund to the water fund. It allows us at that point to have an additional bond up to 25 million. That's where that second part came in. It's not a mandatory bond. He's just saying we have room up to the 25 million if there's other infrastructure or any other funding resources we need, it's there.
Right. This shows the shifting of the tax rate from M&O to INS.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the overall tax rate does not change.
But that overall tax rate, and I think these are soft figures right now because we don't have the numbers from TAD yet, correct?
Yeah, they're projected. That's correct.
Okay, so these are sort of soft and they will change. But as I look at it, and after the gentleman from Samco, whose name I can't recall right now, Andrew clarified this for me, is the de minimis rate of $500,000 for our size community. Rough and tough, if we have about $6 million in property tax revenue, does that sound about right? Somewhere in that figure?
Yes, sir.
If we go to the de minimis rate, that's an 8% tax increase. Not tax rate, tax increase. And just so that we know, that's what we're talking about, is in roughly an 8% property tax increase.
To say the 8%, I don't know that number.
But I mean, it's
yes.
close. If you know, 8% of 6 million is 5 million. Yeah. Something.
Yes, even though our tax rate does not change.
No, but
Yes, you can have a tax
right.
property value increase. And that is projected in.
It's a tax increase.
It is a tax.
It is a tax increase.
Based off of property values.
Right. And
We're just not bringing it down to net. Basically, that's what it is. We're not bringing it down to the effective rate.
Yes.
If we brought it down to the effective rate, then you go up from there. So by not bringing it down to effective, then you're effectively, it's,
by not bringing it down to the effective rate,
Yeah.
it is a tax increase.
yes, there is an increase in the
Yes.
taxes. That's correct.
Just so,
Based off of property values.
Yeah.
yeah, but property values,
It's a piece of the formula.
yeah, it's,
It-
yes,
It's definitely a piece of the formula based off of the rate that
right. But I think we need to fund the city
that our
Based-
tax rate is.
based on what it costs to provide the services and not based upon the cost of whatever the valuation may or may not be, because those are really two different things.
Well, and that's the reason why we have Seiko, we have Andrews here to help us make sure we're being accurate in our assumptions for say. And that's the reason why he's the expert in it, to come in, to be able to place that bond and to indicate what our funding is projected to be, which generally speaking, they're pretty accurate on what those numbers are. And that's the reason why we're at where we're at.
Yeah, 8% of 6 million is roughly 480,000.
Mhm.
Um,
And that also is not including new tax.
right, and yeah, that is, yeah, exactly, because that's excluded as it should be. As it
Absolutely.
As it
Yeah.
should be. But we are bumping right up against, if we go, that's close to the diminished tax rate, very close to it.
Mhm.
Within $20,000. And that's an 8%. We're talking about an 8% tax increase. In other words, on aggregate, when you sit down and you pay your taxes in January, you're going to be paying 8% more in city taxes. That's what we're talking about. I just want to make that clear, not only with us, but the people out there that may be watching at home.
Well, that's not just Kennedale. That's our whole nation.
Right, yeah, but
And it's based off of only as a 3.5% increase. That's the max. It cannot go any more than that.
in our case, I believe it can, since we're under $30,000. A 3% tax increase on the M&O rate would be half of this. It would be $220,000. Now that's the 3.5%. But see, what caps us is the 500 de minimis rate.
Mhm.
And that, if we go to that de minimis rate, that's a lot higher than a 3.5% increase. It's roughly 8% increase.
And what Andrew was telling us during our council meeting, he does not believe we're going to hit that threshold.
Right. Okay.
Okay, can I get back to, not get back to, but I have a basic question. I have a very basic question.
That's
Okay,
good
from our,
questions.
yeah, very good question. Just to make sure everyone's clear on where we're at and where we're going. All right. So at the last meeting, we had this option A, and this was the sewer basin B for $11 million to do it all at one time, or 13 if it was, is that correct? Am I reading that right?
That's correct.
Okay. So it was 11-2 to do the critical sewer.
Mhm.
So I don't remember. So help me refresh my memory how we got to 13 million.
That was the increase of adding from Mr. Dagenhart was indicating the 1%
Oh,
that
okay.
he's talking
Okay.
about.
Okay.
That was the
So
one.
that
part.
wasn't part of this.
And the contingency
Okay.
funding.
Okay.
That's one of the reasons why the increase from that 11.2 to 12 and now
Okay.
to 13.
Okay. So because of just, well, if we don't do it all at one time, I have an $11 million price tag on it. Right. Right. But let's just assume for this conversation that we're doing it all at one time
That's correct.
at 11 million. Is that number still an accurate number? Okay, so that's where we've got
That's the
other two.
increase.
Okay,
Yes,
so this is at 11 plus the contingency. So this is now an actual all at one time at 13 is what we're
that's
saying.
correct.
Okay.
Are
Are we clear about all that?
Yeah.
Everybody clear on that one?
So just to clarify, if we do all three projects, that would be 13 million.
Correct.
That's what's budgeted to make sure we're covering all future expense.
Project one, the critical would just be the 11 million.
No,
No,
that's cheaper than that.
yeah, project one by itself is only 5 million.
5 million. Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
Can we go back to the water towers? You were speaking that you wanted to have 500 million gallon and a 750. That's on. Let me eat it. I'll eat it. Is that better? Okay. And then now you're talking, but we were talking last week about 750 and 750. What's changed with you?
That's correct. My idea was if we're sitting at 500,000, can we put additional the next size up? Based off of that, we can, but it's gonna be a huge cost. Then we pretty much have to build the foundation where now we don't have to do that. The foundation is based off of a 500,000 tank versus if we had to go in and put a 750,000 gallon, we have to rebuild the whole concept of it. This here, we can continue to use the foundation that it's on. So we just build on it. The one at the fire station, the same way, it's already a 750,000 gallon. So it's the same concept. We go back with a 750,000 and we don't have to worry about the base. we can just build on it.
That makes sense. And then the gravity tower, you don't want to do that now. When would you like to do that?
Well, currently, we don't have the funding for it. I think the numbers were roughly around 11 million for elevated tank.
How big was that tank?
That was a 2 million gallon.
2 million. Okay. And where would you like to put that, Christian? Fire station. So in your opinion, if something dramatic happened and we had 3,250,000 gallons of reserve water, potentially, how much of the population would that cover and for how long?
Christian, do you mind coming?
Gonna make you talk, Christian.
You need to do your storage tank with a projection that your population is going to get bigger.
Yes, that's my
For
question.
any storage tank, be it a ground storage or elevated storage tank. Right now, Kennedale is sitting real slim because based on our peak use and what our storage capacity, we are right there. Should we have a blowout, we in a world of hurt because we don't have the storage to supply service to our community.
So I know the expectation is about 20 years and that's just, a minimal guess. So potentially that would cover how much of the population, like we're currently at 10, let's say we're 15, 20 years from now.
Where we at right now, if we go back with all the 2 ground storage tank, the 750 and the 500,000, plus our elevated and our standpipe, we are sustainable with our current population. If we go add another 200,000 people or 2,000 people, we in a world of hurt. You need to have more supply. And that's just me. I'd rather have elevated storage tank. I know it's costly, but it's going to be beneficial for us in the long run.
And how long does that cover? 10,000 people?
Well, it's going to be determined on the size of the tank. Because on average, each individual per person per day utilizes about 320 gallons. So if we were to project 320 gallons per person by another 2,000, then you're looking, I don't know, I can calculate in my head.
I could do that though. Thank you. That
But
clarifies it.
That's how you need to project for your distribution system. You need to look at your growth in fire flow, businesses, hospitals. The usage is more, so we need to have supply.
So that $2 million gallon tank, because that's about 500,000 million gallons more than we had originally talked about when we did the tour.
Right.
But we're also figuring we already have one, and that's how big? The one that's over here. By
Elevated?
this house?
We have a 1 million elevated.
Okay, so potentially we'll have $4,250,000 of gallons
Gallons.
of water.
Right. Because right now we at about 2.5. And that's right now because we still have that T4, the one by the high school is out of service.
And you have all of the water tank, the elevated water tank refurbishing, that's under the ARPA funds for now. That's where that's at, right?
Correct.
Yes, that's what we plan. And we need to get that done soon.
Right.
And then Darrell and I was talking, we can't afford to put that out now. We have to
Right.
wait till the late fall
Right.
because then the summer is coming. But now that the T4 is done, we could go ahead and start working on that. When that's backing up, we could go and do the
Right.
T1 and then do the elevated.
Right. So you got the funds for that, so you can move forward with that. And then what you're asking then is to move Call It Sublet, where Call It Sublet was going to use those funds, is to have the 2.4 for Call It Sublet. Did I misunderstand that?
Currently, when you look at the new data that I gave you on the bond stuff, we're covered. However, it does not anticipate any future funding For instance, and I'm going by Mr. Degenhardt's calculations, if we're looking at 1%, some of these funding numbers are from 2018. Some of them are 2020. So we already know we have funding is not going to necessarily be there at full. With that said, also, there's some other calculations that can come in that can be very beneficial to the city. One of them is like well, Safe Route to School is a prime example. That's one of them that came in that 2018 tax note you guys done. So ultimately, that started out as really very low cost. So now we're roughly already $400,000 in. TxDOT is only supplying 800. So now it's a 1.3 million. And if we continue to add 1%, that's eating that money that actually was in 2018.
Right.
So that's some of the math that's coming in for that 2.4 is to
Okay.
continue to hit our milestones that we're wanting that these bonds were issued for whatever reason has not been able to get completed in that time period.
I see. Okay. And I
Another
do.
one is like the Valley Lane, the stabilization of that.
Right.
Same thing. And it's roughly a 2.4 million. So those numbers have already increased as well. The good thing, and this is one of the things I shared, is also with that Valley Lane stabilization, what I'm waiting for is FEMA has taken over part of it for a possible grant. And I've been in contact with them, but I have not received an answer back. Generally, I was indicated that I should know something June, July. Obviously, I haven't heard anything, and I've been keeping track with them. I just haven't got an answer.
Gotcha.
But that's a $1.7 million bond, grant. So that's one of the reasons why that project has been somewhat on a hold for the last 3 months.
All right.
The opportunity to gain 1.7, and FEMA actually made contact with us. The grant that we've already received for that was 750. We applied for another one, was actually denied that grant, but FEMA went in and accepted it and took it upon themselves to move forward with it. So I look at it that is a very strong possibility we get that grant. We're just waiting for FEMA to go through their process. That's correct.
So back to the water sewer fund. Yeah, and specifically the water study. You want to do a CO bond to fund a water study that will tell us how much to fund the CO bond. Am I correct in my?
No, the water fund, the water rate that we're asking is roughly $25,000, and that rate will tell us where the water rate that we charge our citizens to fund this bond and what we're already behind on.
Yeah, the deficit.
So what we have currently is not significant enough to cover our current debt. So we're already behind. So this water rate study will tell us, one, we need to go up here just to cover where we're at. And second, we'll give you a 5-year projection to cover this bond and any future possibility of infrastructure that we need. That's the reason why the additional 2 million, because at one point we have to get the tanks. We're in a critical point now. Like Christian was indicating, the tank that we have by the high school is out of committee. We can't even utilize it. So we're already 500,000 gallons out. The one that's here at the high school or the fire station, which is the 750,000 gallon, it's leaking. So one way or another, we have to stop the leak or we put a new one in. The idea is come back, put the new one in. There's about a roughly $271,000 difference between
A rehab. Tank.
and just buying a new tank. And one of the things that if we go in and do a rehab, they have to go back and do an inspection. And there's so much more work they have to do to that just to make sure we can do it. We got to go paint it. We got to not only go in and weld it. So we're the cost is, you
Almost-
might as well just buy a new tank. Cause that's basically what they're having to do is go refurbish it, to get it where it's like new.
So this study is going to project for the next 5 years what our water rates will be by year, or we say, no, this year we're going to change it to this rate and that's effective for 5 years.
No, basically, and this is the same thing Safeco and Andrew had presented to us during the council meeting. Right now, he told you that he's not an expert in that. So, but he gave you a projection of what his calculations are indicating where a possibility, we're looking at anywhere from a 32% increase to a 37% increase on your water rate. That would be based off the next 3 to 5 years. So he's looking at next year, you'll have a 10% increase in your water rate.
A 10, 10, 10.
Yeah, that's what, okay.
Then the second year will be additional 10. The third year will be additional 10.
So we'll all know what we would be, the increase would be for the next 5 years.
Absolutely.
Okay, that was my,
That's what the rate study will tell us, with all of our predictions of what we're having to do to get our sewer and water where it needs to be.
So when is the rate study going to be done?
Once it's approved, we'll start that process. It should take about roughly 3 months.
And I've heard the amount somewhere between $25,000 and $50,000 for that rate study. Is that?
We have received a couple quotes already. One of them was a little bit under 25 and a second one was like 27.
Okay.
So one of the ones that was Andrew had recommended, I believe that's the one that was at 24,000 and some change.
Okay. That's not as much as what I was expecting, but the other thing we need to consider is ultimately we have to approve the rate. Ultimately, we set the rate. And that could potentially be $25,000 that we wouldn't need to spend. It's just, although a rate study would probably give us much better, I mean, it should give us much better information, but we have a lot of studies and we've spent a lot of money on studies, and some of them are really good and some of them are not so great.
Well, and I do understand your concern about the 25 grand. But also I think it'll be beneficial for our citizens to know, one, what we're doing, and two, what they're paying for, and ultimately why. Yes, you're absolutely right. We can go by what Andrew is recommending, but he also told you that I'm not an expert at that. I could be off. And I think it's better for us to come in, and I think the study is done. We can tell our citizens, this is how we're going to get you what your needs are, and we can be accurate about it. I mean, nothing's set in stone, but I think it's the right way to go, and we can be accurate about it.
One other thing, and I guess this is as good a time as any to bring it up. We are a type B EDC. And reading through the rules and regs about type A's and type B EDCs, we can allocate, if we come up with a number for how much of these water and sewer infrastructure improvements are related to business development, we could, if we so choose, and if we did have the funds, we could defray part of that expense with payments from the EDC fund. And I found, and that I'd remembered from years ago, but I came across something new. And that is, if the voters that are subject to the sales tax, the add-on sales tax, voters of Kennedale, vote to approve it, you can fund water projects from the EDC. And if I currently understand it correctly, we have like a fund balance of 1.8 million, somewhere in that range.
Mm-hmm.
I think this council should also consider, could we use some of the EDC proceeds? And I'm talking about a portion of them. I'm not talking about all of them, a portion, to fund the debt load on this water and sewer project?
Doesn't it? It's been 8 years for me, Rocky. You read it a little bit more recently than me. It doesn't have to be very specific, like we're going to build a business park in this section, so we.
No.
This is kind of the way I look at it, Rocky. And first, I don't disagree with you. What you're asking, I think is possible. But ultimately, even like you described, when you're talking about our classifications, it's still tax money. It doesn't matter if it's coming from the general fund, water fund, or the EDC. This is just simple-minded looking at it. We have an opportunity to fund it through the general fund. That portion needs to go there. The other part is the water and sewer that ultimately it should fund itself. That's the idea of that fund is we don't go above, we don't go below, we stay for what the need is. And I think we're able to do that with what's being presented to us.
And I understand that philosophy. What I'm saying is part of the reason that we're doing this is for quote unquote economic development. And this is a method of supporting some of that economic development. And I'm just saying it's a consideration that I think we should take into account. And it's not much. It wouldn't be much. It might be, I don't know, 10%. The difference that I see is that it's collected on sales tax. And some of that sales tax some of our sales tax does actually come from outside the community, people coming into our community and spending their money. And this would help them in some small way to defray the cost of the water and sewer that we currently have.
I'd be in favor of exploring that further. It sounds, I haven't dived into the details, but it sounds reasonable to me. I know somebody on the EDC, maybe they can look into it.
Well, and obviously we can do that. We are on somewhat of a timetable. We need to vote on it Tuesday. And if that's the direction, obviously, you guys want to go, I will explore it and see what I can do in that manner.
And it wouldn't necessarily have to be to fund the associated projects with the water and sewer directly, but it could serve to fund any other related or cost overruns that might occur in the future.
This is just me personally for face value of it. I don't see the funding going to make that big of a difference in that manner. I don't disagree with you.
It would probably be in the 10% range, but
or less,
or possibly less. But
I don't disagree with you. I really don't. I just don't know. Will that amount really equal out itself when honestly, to a certain extent, we're looking at the same monies coming from an EDC side versus the general fund or the water. Those are our three fundings. With the 15 million, it's coming out of the water sewer. And that's the part you're talking about. EDC should play a role in paying for some of that infrastructure. Right.
it could. It could. It's something to be considered. And I understand we got a short runway. But it's something that I think it's possible. I just think we should consider it.
Is there something specific that we can narrow it down to consideration? For example, are you suggesting that it's a specific amount? So rather than a $15 million bond, you would suggest a 14 million? I mean, is there
I
a
would see it
specific?
more as something that perhaps could fund or defray the cost of these Senate Bill 3 requirements.
Can I circle back on Senate Bill 3? You brought it up. So I understand the intent of Senate Bill 3. How long do we have to make those changes that it's calling for?
Currently, the state is requiring us to give them our plan. It's not giving us a deadline. Only deadline we received is provide the state with the plan. And basically, that's what this is based off of. For us to be able to move forward, one, we got to supply them that plan. And that plan is for us, for Arlington to supply that 20% that they're agreeing to. The other part is for us to get the tanks. Once we get the tanks in place, then we get the generators. The generators are in place that ultimately fulfills that requirement by the Senate Bill 3. Is that accurate, Christian?
Yes, but we are behind on the Senate Bill 3 anyways. Because that was supposed to be submitted by March of 2022.
Are we the only city in Texas that's behind on Senate Bill 3? Because I would just wagering here that there's probably a lot of municipalities
A
struggling with
lot,
it.
but you need to bear in mind that there's fines attached to those. The longer we stay to get that into compliance, fines are adding.
No, I understand that better than most, to be honest with you.
So we are already a year behind. And then we have, after you submit that and the plan is approved, then we have a deadline to get those infrastructure in place. They're going to stick a deadline that's 3 months. You need to have your generators in place.
Do we know how other municipalities our size are
A
handling?
lot of them are behind just like us, but most of them already got the plan in.
And-
That's the stickler.
Right, and-
Plan is.
And so let's say, for example, that we're looking at we're going to say that the generators somewhere, I believe you said in the,
Just under 900,000.
yeah, 900,000. Okay. And we've got a plan. So hypothetically, let's say that we have a 3-year plan to comply. I think that's reasonable. Okay. And the boneheads at Austin, who knows, they're, I mean, they are transferring their responsibility for inability to manage an electrical grid. They're dumping it on us while spending hundreds of millions of dollars on ERCOT and encouraging unreliable power sources of windmills and solar that work only part of the time. And so here they dump this, okay, here, you take it. But for example, in this, that might give us time, and I know it's a small amount of money, but if we're talking about increasing people's utility bills 30%, let's just say that that's on the bottom end. Let's say that that's $35 or $40. That is going to be the difference between many of our citizens making it that month and not making it. And so any, if it's $2 off their run cost or the water bill, but in this case, if we could explore the idea of funding the Senate Bill 3 via the funds or a certain amount of funds from the EDC over 3 years, 5 years, pick a time scale, I think that would be worth considering also.
It looks like I'm sorry.
No, you just threw a third part in with the Senate Bill 3. You're wanting to separate the Senate Bill 3 funding for something separate, or are you talking about for the EDC?
I'm talking about if we develop our Senate Bill 3 plan, and let's say that, and we're talking hypotheticals, let's say that's over a 3-year period.
At 1.5 million for the
At
2
1.5.
generators.
Right. Could we consider funding that to some extent, maybe not all, but some extent from the EDC funds?
I really don't have that answer. The way it was explained to me is that the SB3 and other funding comes through our utilities, which ultimately is our water, sewer, stormwater, things of that nature. What ultimately that's the purpose of utilities is to pay that infrastructure. I'm not going to say EDC can't pay for it. Obviously, it can play a role in it.
Right.
What we're looking at, or what I'm looking at, is that we're able to afford and fund our needs. And that those needs are without a tax rate increase. So our rate stays the same. Yes, what we were talking about earlier is correct. But that's also what's funded, why we can fund that without increasing that tax rate. With that part, there could be a possibility that the tax rate would have to increase. Then the second part of it is the utilities to pay for the 15 million. If to offset some of that cost, you want to use the EDC funding. I think that is a possibility because it does play a role in it, just for economics, or if we have a new business or whatever come in, that's what it is. That's also the second part of having this water rate study done. It will actually put the funding where it needs to be. So for instance, Take 5 Water, our car wash, they're actually use more water probably than anybody else in the city at this point. So that cost analysis will put the funding where it needs to be, or expenditures where it needs to be. This is my understanding. We're somewhat flat right now. So everybody here is somewhat paying the same
And if I
rate.
remember correctly, the commercial rate is the lowest rate.
That's what this study will do. This will put us where we need to be, and the ratios are where they should be. So that's what this 25,000 will pay for, is make that adjustment. Some people's water may not even go up. I believe, and I think Andrew does also, is that, yes, I think everybody's going to see an increase, but not everybody's going to see a 32 or 37% increase. I don't think that's going to be accurate. I do think a lot of our manufacturing, our industrial, has a higher use. Some of them have a bigger water meter. And that's not being calculated equally, or the way it's structured. So I think we have some involvement that can be beneficial, and for some that are on a fixed income, I think they're going to see an increase. But we also, I think it's as a whole, we have to also look at everybody, and we have to provide sewer. We have to be able to flush our toilet. We also have to provide water and stormwater and everything else that goes with it. And we're challenged with making sure we can do that. And I'm looking at it, and maybe just for face value, we have an opportunity to do that and give that to our citizens. And if EDC needs to play a role in it, or we feel that it needs to be equaled out of some percentage, I'm okay with it. And I can entertain that. I just need to get on the phone with Andrew to see what that would possibly even look like of adding that to it.
I would want a legal clarification on this too, because what I'm reading to do with water, we have to put it to a vote to the citizens anyways. And there is the condition in here about expanded business development. So if we were getting a water park, for example, then EDC could fund this because they would need more water to supply to facilitate that.
That's correct.
So that's how I'm reading it, not to contradict what Mr. Gilly is saying, but I just would love a legal clarification on even if a type 2 EDC can
Yeah,
do
I
that.
would like that. And yeah, it's on the state controller's website at the bottom towards the definition of a type B EDC. Yeah. But on to something else. Tax rates are important. Tax rate is a number, but people don't pay tax rates. Let's just be clear about that. You don't write you write a check or you have it withheld monthly in your mortgage. And it's the amount of taxes, ultimately it's the amount of taxes you pay, not the tax rate. I just believe that we need to be truthful and open with people and not fall back on this excuse that we didn't increase your tax rate, but your taxes went up 10%, 15%, 20%. Because that's kind of the three-card Monte that's been played in this state since the early 80s of tax rates and valuations. And valuations, and it's beyond the scope of this board, but valuations are wildly inaccurate. And, you know, back to the other thing, it's not just the lower income people that will be impacted by this.
It's everybody.
It's everybody to some extent, but now you're going to be faced with, and this is coming, we're going to have a dry year, and someone that's not low income is going to be looking at the difference. Do I spend $600 to water my yard, or do I get a citation from code enforcement because my grass is dead, or my HOA because my grass died? These are serious issues. Water and sewer is a serious issue. We just, you know, we just have to know what we're about to do to people. That's all I'm saying. And that we need to do it as fairly, equitably, and cautiously as we can, and not rush into anything, although we have to, especially with the sewer issue and with the water storage tank issue. It is, I bet I could go back to 2012 in the budgets, and every year we would see $800,000 allocated in a budget to refurb the water storage, except I think last year, I don't believe it was in the budget last year, but I'm not an expert on that. So year after year, it was budgeted, never completed. 2019, we signed with Arlington. What I was told, what we were told here in open session was that going forward, we signed this maintenance agreement with Arlington. We can look for significantly lower water rates and water cost. And I didn't believe it then, and I think my suspicions have been proven true. It cost a lot more. It's costing us more than we were led to believe. And also, we were told that, well, you know, if we go with Arlington, there's a possibility that we don't have to refurb the water tanks. Do you recall that, Mayor Joplin? So here we are 4 years later, and nothing has happened in the intervening 4 years. So our backs are against the wall. We got 2 ticking time bombs, and it's just a crap sandwich. And we're going to have to eat it. And we're going to have to answer for it.
And we have solutions in front of us. And that's what we're here to discuss, is what those solutions are, right? What we need to do first. And I think what's been put before us is obviously the most critical is water. We have to move forward with that. We have to provide water. We have to do that. Do you see anything on here that could be, I'm not going to say removed, but could be sidebarred? I couldn't think of the right word.
Well, and
I mean, under the 17.4, you know, under this one.
as what you indicate is 100% accurate. There's 2 things we have to do. One, we have to supply water, and we have to supply sewer. And both of them are at the critical part. Although whatever that may have happened in the past are bad decisions or bad choices, whatever that may be, unfortunately, we can't change the past. We can only learn from the past. And honestly, in my opinion, create the right future ahead of us. And I feel it's our responsibility to make that best decision, not only for today, but even leading up for the next 20 years, and sometimes maybe even beyond that. And I believe with all my heart that I've done that for you. I don't think we're making a rushed decision on it. It's been something that honestly we've been talking about for a while. It's just we hadn't had a solution. We hadn't had something to be able to truly grab a hold of and say, okay, this is an option. And we found that, and I didn't think it was coming, but it did. And we have it in front of us to be able to make that decision for today. And for the ones that come in behind us. And if we want to go to the 15 million, we can make that happen. We can do that. That's not going to change what we have to do with our water rate. It doesn't change that. And I think that's the most critical part. I think all of us here don't want anything to put any more burden on anybody. I think all of us are in agreement with that, including myself. But also I know we have to flush the toilet and we all have to have water. And that's a necessity that honestly, in my opinion, we don't have a choice to do, no matter what somebody else or some other whatever has put on to our decision making. I truly look at it, our people elected you guys to come in and make these hard decisions. The council hired me to come in and provide a solution for you. And I feel like I've been able to do that, although I don't like it either. But I think this is the best choice we have for our citizens.
Yeah, there's no disagreement from me that that these things need to be addressed. It's just we have to think through that we're making the best decision and that people's livelihood as well as public safety are at stake.
And also, I just want to clarify on some of the tax rate that you're talking about. I'm not asking to be not transparent, not to share that information, because that's very important. And you're right, most people don't understand the mathematics that goes with it. But also, I truly believe also that it's important for our citizens to know the city of Kennedale is not raising your tax rate. That is important, that we're not. Cost of living for everybody, the cost of doing business for everybody is that increase. And that 3.5% that these evaluations give us helps us not raise that tax rate. So all three of these taxes that we're talking about play a role in how the city operates. On our maintenance and operations, our INS, it plays a role. Just imagine if we didn't have that 3.5% and we had the tax ceiling that is wide open and we could still come in to change the tax rate itself. I think that's a bonus for us. And I think there's a lot of cities that don't have the capability of doing what we're doing. And I think that's an honor for you to be here, even though I'm going through this last budget. You brought that up and you've been very transparent with it. And I hope the city done the same thing as we went through last year's budget and as we go through our next budget, because it plays a role in what we can accomplish. But I think there is a difference in it, and we're going to be transparent about it.
And I think we need to make certain when we say money is being budgeted for a certain item, that it actually goes to that item. And I think that's something that we've seen under your tenure, and I appreciate that.
Well, and it's not just me, it's everybody up here. And I think that's accountability factor that all of us have to look at. And that's the reason why we're all up here. And I believe we have done that, and we're going to continue to do that as is council, our mayor, and myself is here. I think it's our obligation to do so to our public, and they elected you guys for that. And we're going to do that.
Can we take a 5-minute break? Thank you. back. And so I think we are to a point now where let's summarize where we're at. The 17.4. So if you look at your sheets that we were given today, if you look up at the top of the 17.4 proposed bond, you can kind of just look down from there. You can see what it would be funding. And then you can also see at the top the other things that, and on the left-hand side, I love, you can see all of our projects and you can see where they're actually funded from. And what this 17.4, so correct me if I'm wrong here, but the 17.4, it gives us the green light to borrow money up to that $17.4 million. It covers everything that's on this sheet in case of all the projects that we're required to do, whether or not at some point we have to do them. Obviously, like even with Valley Lane, we have to do that. We may be able to get some grant money, but we don't know that, but it has to be done. Valley Lane has been in an emergency situation for I don't know how many years. So, you know, that one, you can't stall on it. You know, I mean, although we are kind of, because we want the, you know, the grant money, the way that works is if you do anything on in advance, it doesn't apply to the grant money. So are there any other questions from council? And Councilman Navarro, I'll start with you to either our Director of Public Works or the city manager in reference to the information that's been provided today.
No, Madam Mayor, I don't have any further questions.
Councilman Michaels,
I have no questions.
Councilman Horton,
No further questions.
Councilman Kelly.
Yeah, I have one. Could we consider putting a performance clause when we let these contracts? Because it seems like to me and I know it's not every contractor, but they're always behind schedule and never complete on time. And is that something that we could consider? And Christian, I'll defer to you. Okay. And do we actually collect the penalties on those? Well, let me ask again.
Should is a big.
We will, going forward, will we collect the penalties on those? Because that's the other thing. I hear it from citizens. And I get just as frustrated as they do. It's not just the money. It's something takes twice as long as what it was projected to be. And I can tell you, if a city wasn't a monopoly, we would be our customer service rating would be pretty low.
I have one quick question, and then I know Councilman Michaels has a question. This new long-range plan that we were given that supports these documents, this is, so with this tool, what what Debbie has put in here, is this assuming the 17.4 and the $1 million general fund? So this information, if you look at this, everyone, this will show you what we look like. Well, actually, mine just is a water sewer fund. We already had the other one.
You have the other one. This one is.
Oh, the one I just tore up. Well, I used to have it. Okay, so this is what the water sewer fund looks like over 5 years. And you can see at the bottom that it's just doing some ballpark rate increases. I mean, obviously, these are not 100%. This is just what it would look like. This is just a tool. So this is what it looks like with the 10%, a 15%, and a 10%. and a 2.5% increase going over over the next 4 years. What that looks like for water and sewer. So this is an excellent tool that we have that we can adjust these numbers and to be able to see what our fund looks like over the next 5 years with where we are currently and then what we're projected to go. Councilman Michaels, you're good? You sure? Okay, well, if there are we've got one more.
One statement, not a question. We're looking at $17 million in debt. And ultimately, over 20 years, that's going to cost people about $25 million. And that's also what irks me about bond presentations, as it's presented as one figure, and ultimately with interest over 20 years is going to be, I mean, I shouldn't do math in public, but it should be about, so we're talking about 25 million
Correct.
extracted from the community
That's correct.
to be used for the community.
That's correct.
I got a couple of comments back too.
Yes, sir.
Just in that regard, unfortunately, our country lives off of that debt. But also our tax rate is calculated because of that as well. Because we can't overtax to have a savings per se. But yeah, very well said. Also, I know we talked about a lot of stuff tonight, and I think it was all great information. This will be presented in a sense Tuesday as well. So I wanted to, you guys have all the information you possibly can to be able to make that choice. If you have any questions beyond today, obviously you can always contact me. But if you can let me know, I can make sure I have your answer Tuesday. And that way you can make the best choice that you feel is needed. So.
I appreciate that. And I would agree completely the frustration over the cost of having to borrow money. It just shouldn't be that. If we could wave our magic wand, I would fix that in a heartbeat. It just shouldn't cost that much money for cities to borrow. It's basically a 1-to-1 or more. And I think it's obnoxious. It's absolutely obnoxious.
Well, it's not the cost that I object to. It's how the problem is stated. I mean, when they hear 17 million bond, oh, it's going to cost us 17 million. No, it's going to cost you.
Correct. You should
25
state
million.
it. You should state the full cost. I agree with you 100%. Yeah, 100%. Well, I don't like that. I don't like how much we actually need compared to how much it's actually going to cost us. That's, I agree.
And we've got the 4.5% coupon rate. Is that pretty much set in stone?
Yeah.
Well, one, we had to give them the nod to go forward with it. Then at that point, we do that, then we'll get the tax rate, or not the tax rate, the interest rate.
All right. Well, with no further ado, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion, we adjourn.
So,
My second.
all in favor? Unanimous. Meeting adjourned.